Okay, Brian and I are starting a podcast. What do you think about that?
I think I'm eminently unqualified to do that, but let's give it a crack.
Okay, so we have lots of things to talk about, but one of the questions that I've been getting asked the most recently, and I'm kind of excited to talk about, is what our girls do for school and how we've come around to this alternative education plan. Each of our kids kind of does something different. We've been through a lot of trial and error on what's worked and what hasn't. So we're going to talk a little bit about our journey with schooling the kids and how we've gotten to where we are.
Yeah, but you called it a plan, and it's not really much of a plan. It's kind of individual approach, what works for what kid each year, and it varies, but focusing on each kid and what their jam is at that particular time.
Yeah, and our kids are so different, like everyone's kids. I think you expect your kids are kind of be similar, especially having all girls and having them close together. But I think we're always surprised at how different they are.
It's still one of the most surprising, it's probably the most surprising thing to me about parenting is how you underestimate how different your kids can be. They all come from the same spot. They're all roughly reared the same way, and they could not be more different people. And I guess, I should have been prepared for that. I had siblings, and we're all different. We all have different lives, different paths. We don't vote the same. We all get along great, but very different. The kids are the same, and you're seeing their personalities differentiate more and more over time.
So Brian's the oldest of 5 siblings. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. We get that question a lot too. And education has been very important to both our families. Brian comes from a long line of teachers on his side of the family. We're both pretty lucky that college was important and something that our parents helped us prioritize and pull off. It wasn't always easy, but it was a priority.
I think all of our siblings have college degrees, actually, right?
Yeah.
Everybody went to college.
And spouses, I think.
And spouses, yeah. Everybody went to college.
So when we had kids, obviously education was just as important to us. Part of why we moved, or why the decision to move was kind of an easy one, was we were really excited about putting Francie in kindergarten, and the friends we would meet. My parents' lifelong friends are people that they met from our school, from going to Catholic school. The parents that they met at kindergarten orientation are still some of their best friends to this day. And so I think Brian and I were excited about that. And we didn't really find that there. I think, the Bay Area that turned into Silicon Valley was a really different place when we started raising kids than it was when I grew up there. It was a different place than where you grew up and started kindergarten. We weren't really excited about the hustle and bustle, the priority on entertaining kids all the time. We just really weren't finding our people. So when things kind of all just happened at the same time and we decided that we wanted to go all in on ranching, we moved up here. Of course, we looked at the schools because that was a big question. Everybody said, well, how can you move from Silicon Valley to this rural town of 600? Aren't the schools terrible? And it was quite the opposite. At the time, the school district that we moved into was one of the highest rated in the state when they looked at things like, per capita.
Yeah, it was test scores and home affordability, and it was top 4, top 5. And it was in pretty impressive company, that little rural frontier school district that we moved into. But you say that we didn't necessarily find our people. I don't know if that was the case. It was just maybe we didn't find our depth. Like we were looking when we had kids. I think we kind of were looking for purposeful experiences with them all the time, and less about what they had and more about what they did. And that's kind of where some of the conversations about the ranch were kindled, and discussing having more of a rural outlet for our kids, doing more with their hands and their minds, not just their minds. And so the ranch kind of a rural angle kind of came into the picture, and somehow we kind of overshot the mark and kind of went long and deep into the world we have now.
Yeah, that's true. Because we did. I mean, we had great friends down there. It was just we
great
weren't finding what we were kind of looking for. So when we moved here, you know, the schools, great ratings can mean a lot. Obviously, you don't put all your weight in that basket. But the teachers, the principal became friends. They were supportive of us moving there. They were great people. They were very educated, smart people who cared about educating these kids. And I always said that it seemed like the teachers cared so much because their kids were also in these same classes, or, you know, someday the kids that they're teaching might very well marry their kids or employ their kids or work for their kids. So it was very much a community feel where we're all in this together educating these kids. And so we started with Francie in first grade, Maisie in kindergarten. I think JJ failed out of TK or pre-K.
She would get so spun going to school. She did not want to go to school.
No, she just wanted to be on the ranch.
Well, she wanted to go home and suck on her binky is what she wanted to do. What was she, 5, 4?
Even older than that. It was our biggest parenting flack we got on Instagram, was that we let JJ have a binky until she was too old for a binky. But anyway, we had a great elementary school experience with the kids. Great people, great teachers, great schools. We missed them, obviously, but, you know, when they're little, it's more about their shorter days, or, you know, we had 2 of them home. And then we hit 3rd grade for Maisie, and it wasn't really working for her. She was learning so much on the ranch. She loved to be on the ranch. She didn't love being in the classroom. So we started exploring some alternatives for Maisie and did, I think, a semester having Maisie at home, and kind of got our feet wet with what does it mean to homeschool. We had a young girl who was an intern who either wanted to be a vet or a teacher, so we said, hey, can you help, you know, we'll put the program together, can you help do this for Maisie? And then fairly soon after that was, that year was okay, but it was kind of an experiment for us.
Well, I think
it was a success.
No, I think we failed at our first attempts at kind of traditional homeschooling because, you know, neither one of us are really were really there to kind of get into the grit of actual teaching. We'd get distracted with ranch issues or restaurant issues or whatever, and that was tough. And I think we kind of, you know, I think I'm sure a lot of people have the same challenge, and kudos to them. If you can parent and be a teacher at the same time, you've got skills that I don't possess.
It's not easy.
No.
So 2020 pandemic hits, schools are closed, and, you know, it took us a little while to figure out what was going on, like everyone else. That's when we started ranch school, because our kids were helping more on the ranch. They were learning how to weld. They were, you know, jumping in and taking over lambing. And we said, gosh, this is actually a really cool experience. Maybe this will turn education on its head and say, you know, how do we get more hands-on learning like this for kids? Maybe sitting in a traditional classroom isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And so we kind of were inspired to bring what our kids were learning to other kids. So we built M5 Ranch School, which took us, it was a whole year. I'm actually looking back shocked that we pulled it off, because we have 1,200 pages of curriculum and worksheets. We have 40 different lessons that all have a couple hours of video, one kind of main video. So the kids helped jump into that. They learned a lot. We still have families that love ranch school. I think that was kind of a win of that year. But come through summer and September's rolling around, and the question is, you know, do we go put kids back in school where there's, you know, it's going to be a little bit different, or do we do something else? And Brian and I are opportunistic, and we always look for something and say, hey, this could be an opportunity to change things up. What if we keep the girls home and, you know, do school from home and change plans this year? Yeah,
no, I think it's always been a temptation, because the kids are so helpful on the ranch. So it's not, you know, indentured servitude or child labor, but, you know, them doing adult jobs and helping out and with their loyalty is great, and their focus and curiosity about problems and solving problems. It's not an artificial experience to kind of get the kids involved in the ranch. It's kind of a necessity to what we do. But the kind of the cool thing about one of the things I've always been impressed with or been drawn to in the ranching side is this great opportunity to work with your mind and your body, and you're solving problems, but you're implementing solutions, and it takes hard work, and it takes whether everything from fixing fence to doctoring cattle to fixing tractors to all the things, you got to get problem solving, lots of problem solving. And I feel I do more problem solving on a daily basis as a rancher than I did as a lawyer. And it's probably maybe the stakes aren't as high and the decimals are all in different places than they were when we were lawyering, but it's still, the wins are pretty significant, and it's involved in its purpose, and there's no let off in its ultimate accountability. You've got to figure things out, and or animals die and things don't happen the way they're supposed to happen. It's been very natural to weave the kids into it and take ownership of things, and I think that was kind of where a lot of the ranch school idea came from, is how do you get the kids engaged? How do you get them engaged in doing things outside? How do you get them engaged in building things and constructing things and solving problems? It was a pretty logical offshoot of what we're doing at home anyway.
So September 2020, we said, all right, we're going all in. All the girls are going to stay home this year, and we're going to homeschool. Brian and I obviously do have a lot of jobs, so we hired a young gal who was a teacher and moved her out here and spent a ton of money on curriculum and textbooks, and I think we tried The Good and the Beautiful and printed out like 800 pages on the color copier, which cost an absolute fortune. Made binders, did everything we thought would set up for success for homeschool, and it just didn't work. The girls were not really into, sitting in a room. We set up rooms upstairs in the bunkhouse, and it was either too hot or too cold, but they were, sitting at a desk doing kind of worksheets and not thriving. So,
and I think part of the challenge of that was also, where the kids were, right? They didn't have it
was like 8th grade, 7th grade, 5th grade.
Yeah, and their friends were in school, and they didn't really have see the benefit of maybe having the flexibility or the freedom, and so they weren't as kind of self-driven at that point as as would have been helpful when we were having someone help teach them.
Right. So we learned a lot that experience, and then what's kind of transpired since then is the girls have jumped back into public school here and there, done a semester here. Maisie did freshman year, Francie did sophomore year at the high school, or the opposite.
She did the opposite.
Maisie did freshman year, though.
Maisie did freshman year and then went to a different program, and Francie was there as a junior part-time and now is not.
So what we found that works absolutely the best is online school programs. We've researched, we've talked to different people, we've tried them, and we use 2 to 3 different programs online depending on kind of what the goals are. And so this kind of evolution took us a little bit to get to. But right now, all 4 are at home. We built this fun little study room in the new house, and each girl has a desk, and they either work from a laptop or an iPad with a keyboard. And Francie does a school called Laurel Springs Academy. It's based in Ojai. We found it when she was in 8th grade. She does their academy program, which means she has real teachers. She picks the classes. It has a ton of honors classes. It offers AP classes. You can take college classes at Rutgers and Clemson, and it's a very academically rigorous program. It's an expensive program. I mean, I know all school is expensive now, but for online school, that was kind of a decision we had to make, and you never want to ask, is your kid's education worth it? But it is expensive, and so we had to really look at it and make sure that it was going to provide for Francie everything she wanted. Francie's very academic. She wants to go to law school. Grades and school has always been a priority for her. She works hard at it. So Laurel Springs has given her the ability to, have, what does she have, like a 4.6 or something?
4.67, I think is what she said.
And she got 4s on her AP exam she took last year. She's taking 4 APs this year. And she's done that all herself. I mean, we do not, I want to say we don't participate, like that's a little harsh, but we don't.
No,
she doesn't.
it's all her.
Which I think is my favorite part of the program and this online school is that it's like the real world. Here's your deadline, here's your goals, here's what you need to do. You better do it. And if you don't, there's consequences in that you're not going to graduate or you're not going to move on to the next grade. So it really motivates you to be self-driven, to manage your time, to understand like how to work in group settings, how to work with like sending in PDFs and submitting paperwork, which I think was one thing that we saw with some of the older kids that like babysat our kids. Some they get to college and not have these computer skills or these real world like hireable skills. And online school for sure introduces them to that at an early age. So Francie's in her senior year at Laurel Springs Academy and is doing great. The other 3 do a program called Acellus Academy. Maisie is not as academically motivated as Francie. Second child. She's got different priorities. She's a great problem solver. What do you always say about Maisie?
I say if I get hit by a truck and somebody's got to take charge of all of this stuff, Maisie is the one I'm putting on point.
She notices things. She's a problem solver. She's got real world, like street smarts.
Empathetic, great personal skill, interpersonal skills. She cares a lot about a lot of things.
And she doesn't love school or academics or isn't like self-motivated to be like, look, I want straight A's. I want to do X, Y, or Z. So Acellus Academy is a great program. It's not as academically challenging, but it's got all the bells and whistles of here's your classes, here you watch videos, but they're neat videos. Like the Spanish class I saw is instead of sitting and conjugating verbs, they have this cute young girl in Spain, and she goes to a cafe one day and takes the kids along and says, okay, we're gonna order an affogato and ask where the restrooms are and do all these things in Spanish. So if you're ever traveling, like here's how you go to an airport. And they're all pre-recorded videos. So the girls can do them at 2 a.m. They can do them, block do their work. Well, they'll do like 2 weeks of math and then move on to 2 weeks of English. They totally have flexibility to do all that. But it gives you a dashboard and it shows you a gauge for each class of if this is their, end date, that you pick your end date. If this is the end date, here's how much you have to do each week. Here's the goals you need to make sure that you complete that. If you get a little behind, you might have to do a little more. If you get ahead, you can either move your end date up or take a little breather. And then it has a parent dashboard where you can log in and see how much time they spend on each class each day, what their grades are. And one of my favorite parts, and I think the most impactful of this online programs, it kind of got a bad rap during COVID of like, oh, your kids just sitting in front of a Zoom call all day. But it's much more dynamic than that, and it tracks them. So like their math class, if they take a math quiz and they miss half of the questions because they haven't learned that skill, it immediately stops them and says, we're going to go back and learn this skill, and then you're going to take another quiz to make sure you learn that skill before we move on. And in a traditional classroom, you just, you can't do that. You have to turn in the test, the teacher has to grade it, you get it back, you've already moved on. And what I've actually seen in a lot of like the Bay Area, prestigious private schools is they're going to more of a model like this where they have a few hours of individual instruction every day. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think that dashboard, there's 2 real benefits of that for parents who are, kind of relying on their kids to manage their own lives, but still kind of provide guardrails. It's a great way to check in and just see how things are going and progressing. And the other benefit is I think the kids, knowing that, putting a project in front of a kid where they work by the hour
versus putting a project in front of a kid where they get paid for the job. When you do it by the hour, there's not always a lot of incentive for them to do it more quickly, more efficiently, to kind of figure out what's the best way I can do this well. Whereas, when you do a project and you're paid by the project, your mindset is, how do I get through this efficiently, well, and the dashboard kind of inspires, I think, at least a couple of our kids. I mean, Tessa when she first got lined up with Acellus, she just, redlined herself until the wee hours of the morning, day after day, trying to get it done and get her speedometer kind of more redlined and ahead.
20% of the year.
Yeah, in like a week and a half or something. Yeah. It wasn't healthy.
But it's it's project management, and then
it's real world stuff.
It is, and I think the quality of the education is great. And if we kind of do both ends of the spectrum, and Acellus satisfies a lot of what is important to us in terms of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then obviously our girls supplement with a lot of ranch world real life experience. So for us, it works. Acellus, and we have also done one called Bridgeway Academy, because if Acellus, you have to start beginning of the year and go through the whole year. So one year, JJ wanted to switch. JJ and Tessa last year, when we went to Arizona for 6 weeks, went from public school to online school, and Acellus, you can't start mid-year. So we used a program called Bridgeway Academy that's very similar to Acellus, that we were also happy with. I think Bridgeway was about $400 a month. Acellus is $175 a month on a program that if you watch a sponsored science video every week, you get a discount. Otherwise, it's like $350 a month. But I think they're definitely worth it. Our girls are getting a good education and learning real life skills, and it gives them the flexibility to be much more efficient. I'd say they spend 2 to 4 hours on school, maybe 4 days a week.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And Francie with her AP classes is spending more, but she also will batch work. If she's got a big rodeo week, or we're in Arizona, or she's, working, training a horse, she might have a really light week, and then the next week she'll, hey mom, I want to go to your shop and work out at a desk with no distractions. I'm going to be there till 10 o'clock, and she'll just really focus for shorter blocks. But again, that's real life skills, and teaches you more than just what you're learning in your online classes.
Yeah, but I think the other important thing is it's not been this kind of one size fits all. We never made this decision of, we're going to take our kids out of public school and put them into online school. It's really evolved based on, that particular kid, that particular year, what's working best for them, what are their goals, and what can they get the most out of the school year. Because, I don't really personally, I don't have these enormous ambitions for my kids, becoming anything in particular, or becoming super successful, or even academically, over the top. I just want to give them the opportunity, the groundwork to reach their potential, whatever that is. And it varies from kid to kid. It hasn't really, there's no one size fits all. It's just kind of evolved to what works for our kids and our family under the circumstances. And I think talking to other people who've kind of made the decision from on high that we're going to, leave public school and go to online school, I think it evolving from the kids up has really helped make it be more successful.
Yeah, I think last year we had 4 kids in 4 different circumstances.
Yep.
And I will say Francie, for her junior year, did half public school so she could take ag classes and participate in FFA, which is Future Farmers of America, which has speaking competitions, and you raise your steer, and a lot of really neat opportunities. Brian was a big part of FFA, and you can't really be in FFA unless you are attending a more traditional school, which is something I hope might change, because I think online and homeschool kids are the perfect kids to be doing FFA. But right now, that hadn't worked for her. So our school district was supportive of Francie doing 3 classes on campus and then 4 classes at Laurel Springs, and that it took some finagling, but it's worked. And a lot of people also ask, like, well, are you worried about college admissions? Like, what will their transcripts look like? Will colleges just think that this is wild? But I have a relative who worked in admissions at very prestigious schools and said that when they see, an online program, Laurel Springs or what it is, they recognize that those are rigorous. Those kids do really well in college. They've had to be independent workers, and the quality of what they're learning is just as good as anything. So we're comfortable that if our kids want to go to college, we aren't pushing that everybody has to go to college. It's a great experience, and if you're on a path where you want to go to grad school, it's obviously necessary. But we're big believers now, and maybe trade school is the best path for you, or starting a business, or getting work experience. We've seen that a lot with people we've hired. Yeah,
no, it's 2 things. It's grit and problem solving. Maybe 3 things. Accountability too. But those are the attributes that I think are so much more important than where somebody went to college in terms of finding satisfaction in a job, doing a job well, but just putting your head down and doing it is I think something that's critical. And I looked at, again, and this isn't about me, but when I go to law school, and you go to law school for 3 years, and they teach you how to be an attorney, and you're venerated as a potential attorney, and you're learning all these esoteric academic things, and then you have this. I went and worked for a big law firm after law school, and then you have this hard landing spot that I just went to school for 3 years, thought I had it all figured out, and the legal secretary who I have been assigned to work with knows 20 times what I do about the practice of law, and they know it through grit, determination. They're far more qualified to do things than a lot of first-year law school students are. Experience being around it and just solving problems, having those. It's a very tough job being a legal secretary, and having those skills to interpersonal skills and things like that. You don't learn it all in an academic institution. So
no, and I think it's really interesting. It's such a different generation, and we were kind of right after the .com boom. New workforce. The world's different with the internet, and our kids are going to be with the AI boom and what changes in terms of jobs. And this is a conversation we've had too, in that. So some people say, oh, your kids are home online on the computer all day. They must cheat. They must use ChatGPT. And they don't cheat with it, but I encourage them to learn how to use it, because it is such a valuable tool, and you are going to be 1,000 times more hireable if you know how to use that well. We've had employees who, help us with the creative side of things. And it's like, okay, let's write a blog post about this and XYZ, do some research, let's write this up. I would have to pay someone for hours to do that. And now ChatGPT can do that legwork, where I always say it's, can only do 80%. You still have to do the 20%. But learning how to do those things, if you want to go get a job and you say, here's ways that I can be super efficient working for you by using this tool and using it well, that's a very hireable skill.
Yeah, it's leveraging those tools and learning the basics and leveraging them computer-wise. Learning to use Excel and learning to use all these different things that writing reports.
But instead of hours of researching the report, like knowing how to pull the right data, put it into an AI type program and say, wow, look at all of this, and then analyzing that to figure out how you can use it in the real world. Like, those skills, I think, are going to be very hireable. And, sadly, as people who've employed a lot of different types of people, we've seen that a liberal arts degree without work experience, you graduate from 4 years in college, I don't care what your GPA is, if you haven't worked, you're not very hireable. And that's going to kind of continue to be a trend. But like I said, there's always a place for education. We're big proponents of education being important, but I think it's changing a lot, and having kids be adaptable and ready for the next generation is really important for us. Online schools giving them that.
Yeah, I mean, I think our best, the people we've hired that have done the best for us over the years in any capacity are not necessarily the ones that went to school. They're the ones who said, "Give me a problem and I'll solve it." And I've never done square payroll before, but I'm going to figure it out. And not doing the bare minimum, just using it as a tool, and really leaning in, having the grit to see it all the way through. I don't think that certainly isn't a skill that I learned in college. And it's something that kind of transcends the academic experience. And the more that we can, I think, hopefully, the more we can arm our kids with those kinds of fundamental skills, life skills, the more successful they'll be in whatever they choose. And I think online school gives them a lot of opportunity to really investigate what their passions are, what they're good at, creating these opportunities to work, creating accountability, and hopefully something to build on.
Let's hope. Okay, I think that wraps up our first episode.
I'm going to say there's almost nobody still listening to us right now. I mean, I think if there's anybody still listening to us, their power must be out or something. They've got nothing better to do.
But would you do another one with me? It wasn't terrible, was it?
Yeah, maybe. Depends on what it's about.
Okay. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening if you got all the way here.